Hey guys, I wanted to ask you how you feel about LCS rookies debuting in the 2018 season. Because when I look at responses to roster announcements, I see different views. It's generally overall pessimistic because people don't really watch Challenger Series or they don't really know how these players will perform in a higher level of competition. So it's hard to be really, really excited about players and then hope that they don't crash and burn or just really hype them up, right? But I think overall, when I was looking at responses to NA roster announcements and EU roster announcements, there was a lot more of a welcoming attitude towards some of the EU LCS rookies than some of the NA LCS rookies. And sure, a lot of that came down to the fact that some of the rosters that are announcing new rookie players or debuting with new rookie players in Europe are rosters that people aren't that excited about in terms of the team overall, but they are hopeful that the players themselves will do well and gain from the experience and do well in later years and really surprise us. Whereas in NA, I think a lot of the rosters that are debuting with rookies are rosters that have traditionally been high caliber, so they think that it's something that these rosters shouldn't have to take a risk on less developed players, and they see that it's as a negative thing. But obviously those aren't the only reasons. Like if you look at a team like Schalke, which has a lot of high tier veteran players on it, and they have a rookie player called Upset, who people are actually really excited for and think will perform well. Meanwhile, you have a team like Cloud9 that has traditionally had a bunch of veterans, but has also, just within this past year, had a great rookie jungler debut, right? Contracts did very well, and people are really excited about how Contracts did, but they look at Licorice and they don't have the same sort of attitude, even though Licorice has a really great reputation within the Challenger Series. A lot of people have been hyping this guy up, but they see him as a very obvious downgrade and are looking down at Cloud9's decision to an extent to replace Impact and Ray with Licorice. Now, perhaps this comparison isn't completely fair because of Svenskeren being perceived as a downgrade to Contracts, for example, but I think so people are a little bit more upset that they used the import slot for the jungler. But I think it's worth noting that the reputation of Licorice and the reputation of Upset from how they did in Challenger Series isn't that different, but the reactions to them being announced on rosters surrounded by more veteran players is still very different. Now, I want to talk about why this is, and I think that some of the two obvious reasons are just the general monetary resources within North America being different from those of Europe, and also the solo queue environments. So we'll just cover those really quickly. The monetary resource thing is that people sort of expect North America because they have so much money, and I think right now it's safe to call North America the wealthiest of the 5 major regions in terms of, so okay, if they are willing to spend the money and they have the money, they could get theoretically any players in the world to an extent, just operating within the import limit, obviously. So when you see players like taking what is perceived to be a gamble on a player who's untested, there's just more backlash, more criticism of that decision because, why aren't you buying this really high level player instead of this guy, right? Why are you taking a chance on him when you could be going for Deft, for example? Why go Deftly when you could go Deft? So I think that's one reason, because when you look at Europe, a lot of times you're seeing European players go over to NA, and so people are looking towards the rookie players or the other rest of the player base to fill in the slots. People are more used to seeing like over 10 rookies per season debut in Europe than they are at NALCS. So even though we've had great rookie debuts in the past year with players like Mike Young, Contracts, and then of course going back further to players like Durdock, people are a little bit more cautious and more disappointed by NA rookie announcements than they are for you, where it's just kind of expected. And it's like, maybe this guy will do well and maybe he won't, and it's part of the excitement is just seeing how he develops throughout the year and how he changes as a player and becomes better. So I think that that's part of the reason why people tend to be more excited about rookies in the EU LCS than in the NA LCS. The second obvious reason, as I already mentioned, is solo queue. People are really, really down on the North American solo queue environment, and it's not just one person saying this, it's pretty much anyone who has played in both has said that the quality of European solo queue is generally more competitive, generally better. It prepares you better for competitive matches. There's more of an emphasis on, laning, and then to an extent some of the toxicity and feedback pushes you to play really, really hard. Obviously, these are all kind of guesses and some of the speculation, so it's not hard and fast why EU solo queue might be better, but this is generally the perception. So if you're training up NA rookies in the North American solo queue environment, it's not going to provide as much experience as the EU LCS rookie environment in European solo queue. The biggest thing, however, I think is not either of those things, though. I actually think it has a lot to do with how the secondary system within the NALCS and within the EU LCS, so the systems and tournaments in place before LCS, have prepared younger players and newer players for competition in the LCS. So, in a brief history with the North American amateur scene, I think right now it's in a really dire state. If you're not in Challenger Series in 2017, you basically aren't really going to get to play a lot of tournaments, right? There was the North American Challenger League in the past. There's kind of the Tyler 1 Invitational, which weirdly enough might be the highest level of competition outside of NACS in the North American scene right now, or at least the one that gets the most publicity of the amateur tournaments. So I think that really lets the North American scene down and North American rookies down relative to the secondary and tertiary system. And by the tertiary system, I mean the national leagues within Europe. And a lot of people who've gone through the national league system and the European Challenger Series system will be kind of down on both of those relative to the LCS competition, but there are still key factors that they give you that the North American Challenger Series and the North American Amateur Tournament scene doesn't really give you. So let's talk about separate tiers of experience, and we'll say, first of all, you have solo queue, you have scrims as probably the next tier of experience, you have online unbroadcast, so no audience matches that count towards a score of some kind. This is more relevant to North America because I think there are a lot more matches that happen in NACS and stuff that aren't broadcast but still count towards scores, and you see the scoreboards posted on Twitter at the end of the match, but that's about as much sophistication as you get. Then you have the online matches that people can watch live, but they don't take place in the studio. You're still competing in your gaming house or at your home or whatever, and you get that sort of level of experience. And then after that, you start getting into the stage territory. So a lot of times Challenger Series semifinals and finals will take place at the LCS studio, but there won't be an audience present. It'll just be like on stage, broadcast live, and there's cameras on each of the players, so you can see the player reactions and everything like that, but there's no a live audience for the players to get distracted by, or there are no fans in the crowd to add extra pressure. Then you have the next level, which is basically the LCS experience, the being on stage, having a crowd, fans cheering, all of this sort of thing. And then, of course, you get to the international competition, I think is the final level of experience that people sort of put a lot more pressure on you. I guess you could make a distinction between regular season and finals or playoffs as well, but I think that it's fair to have like these sorts of distinctions in place all the way up to the international experience. Within the National League system, you can get all the way up to like the live audience on stage experience if you're playing in like DreamHack or something like this because your team won your National League system. It's like Challenge France, LVP. Like a lot of these will have the opportunity to invite live audiences to come watch the matches, their broadcast, their casters. You are on stage with your coach doing Big Ben, and it's very similar to the LCS experience. It's just not as high level of competition. So you can get all the way up through that in the Challenger Series. You can get all the way up through that in just the tertiary level, like not even the secondary level, right? Not even the Challenger Series in Europe, but the National League system. Whereas in Challenger Series, you have to be on a team that is playing in the final or made it to the promotion. More usually, it's you have to make it to the promotion before you even get an audience experience. So you have to be physically playing against LCS teams on stage in the promotion tournament before you can get any kind of live audience experience in North America as a young player. So I think that that's a big flaw in terms of the amount of experience provided or the amount of LCS level competition simulation that you receive within the North American LCS. So if people ask, like, is it worth it to join a National League team? I think you have to say yes, it's worth it to join a National League team just because you get this type of experience, even if you're playing in, like, the UK League, where people generally accept that the UK League competition is pretty poor. You have players like Alfari and Maxlor who have made it to the UK League finals, who have performed extremely well and sort of just like dominated extremely undefeated runs in that league, but they still get the key set of stage experience. And I think as a result, we see Alfari and Maxler doing well in like CS and then doing well in LCS. I think as a result, you see those kinds of players actually skipping some of the stage fright problems that they have, that other players will have when they go to LCS. Whereas in North America, you don't have any of those types of systems. You have a lot more situations where players have gone straight from solo queue to LCS for their debut, right? And you have, if you look at players like, compare players like Cajal and Licorice, who both started playing in 2015, though of course like Licorice started in December, Cajal started earlier. According to Gamepedia, they may have had like other different types of tournaments experience, but at least what's been documented, this is the situation, and you have a much longer list of teams and different situations in which Cajal has played, a much wider variety of different experiences that he's been exposed to just because he's been in looking at National League teams where there's just like so many more opportunities. And obviously National Leagues perform year-round. They compete year-round, so even in off-season, you have all sorts of tournaments and experience and things of that nature. So I think it's worth looking at the differences there. And when you do have great North American rookie debuts, it's almost like even more mind-boggling that they will do well immediately because they don't have like all of these sorts of the ability to perform at gaming houses like G2 Vodafone. They have a gaming house, and their coach has said that they even work sometimes with their G2 team because they'll play the game on live before in National League before the LCS team encounters it on stage. So I think that these types of experience are also missing in the NA scene, and the fact that you even have NA's players with rookie debuts is all the more impressive as a result, because like you aren't going through one level of competition and then another level of competition before you get to LCS. When I spoke to Loco Doko on League Weekly, right, when we still did League Weekly with Mark Zimmerman, one of his big things and why he thinks that the LCS system is behind is because for example, in StarCraft, you had the experience of being like a coffee boy almost, or just not even getting to play any sort of competitive matches, but being able to play with some of the pros in-house, like just having to go through so many hoops before you are finally debuted and refined as a rookie player, and then you can have a chance to be that much more impressive. Whereas North America, they're just much more situations where you're plucked immediately from solo queue and you're playing on stage in LCS. So I think adding those levels of competition has really helped European rookies in the past. Now that brings us to the topic of how the formats for the secondary league systems will change, right? I think that it will actually be kind of harmful to the European system that we're getting rid of the Challenger Series, because there will still be a big gap between the level of competition in national leagues and the level of competition at LCS, because there isn't going to be necessarily promotion anymore or anything like this, because the European teams, by all counts, or at least from what we've heard from several reports and everything else, will be franchising, so they'll be moving into that setup, but there isn't going to be like a second level of competition in the meantime. Whereas if you look at China is actually adopting a system, is going to make their LSPL or their secondary system a lot like the National League system. However, they'll still have like a promotion section where the top teams in each of the Northwest, East, and South regions are invited to participate to a promotion and then compete for that to get into the LPL. So it won't be a very competitive, it won't be anywhere near on the level of LSPL, where every match was a stage game, not with the live audience, but at least a stage game. And you played every week, you had multiple games, you had a ridiculous amount of teams to compete against, so it won't be on that level in terms of a secondary system, but there will still be like a small secondary tournament for promotion. So meanwhile, in the European system, we'll just basically have the National League, so I think there will be a gap, and you might see, it would be interesting to see if there's a poor level of rookies entering the EU LCS in 2018 summer or 2019 spring as a result. However, I think that there are some teams who are looking at kind of getting a jump on the Academy format and then maybe even taking over and creating the Academy League on their own with just like a few teams. I'm not really sure. Like, I've only heard rumors about this, but it would be really exciting if that happened to kind of fill the gap. But we'll see. It's still probably all very tentative. So meanwhile, in North America, I think that you'll get the benefit of having the players be able to interact more directly with teams. I think there are some negatives to this. Like, for example, you'll have less experience with like a bunch of different environments and playing with a bunch of different players, so you won't necessarily know how this player fits in other environments or with different mentalities. But at the same time, I think it's important for organizations to start looking at talent and raising them in a way that they're going to play together well, that they're going to have an idea for compensating for existing weaknesses that your coaching staff or that your organization or that your team already has. So I think that that will be beneficial. However, I also think that some of the negatives of the new Challenger Series format, or not Challenger Series, but Academy, is stuff that was already inherent in the last CS split, which is that you are having fewer examples of experience with live audience on stream, right? You're having fewer of those. You're just having much more offline games in terms of people are playing online, but there's no audience. You just see the scoreboards on Twitter, and that's going to be half of your matches. I think it's a little bit telling, actually, that Riot didn't necessarily initially see the value of that. Like, they just kind of saw this as missing marketing opportunity or something, and didn't see that you could still get competitive value or competitive experience for your academy team, who you want to just be able to play as many games as possible, right? Like, they're not going to try to win anything. They're just going to try to get as much experience. And obviously everyone wants to win. That's not what I'm saying. But they are just going to try to want to get as much experience as possible. And Riot didn't necessarily initially see the value in that, which I think is another problem within the NA system. Is just like the culture of work-life balance or whatever else. And just the idea that marketing and entertainment has to be completely juxtaposed for things to be successful. So that's an entirely bigger or different topic, but I really wanted to cover the idea of these secondary systems just ill-preparing NA rookies to have a good debut, and this being a part of the reason why people don't really get excited for NA rookies as much as EU rookies. So I think when you look at new rookie announcements, it's unfair to say that NA talent is worse, because I think just overall, because some of the new NA rookies and some of the new NA prospects don't have as much experience or as many resources and as many ways to perform as a lot of the EU players. Like, there's just not as much in place for them. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Academy League affects that. I think it'll be really interesting to see if people will kind of take a step back and think a little bit more, okay, maybe I need to give this guy an extra year in LCS before I dismiss them, because he may just be lost. He may just not know what he's doing, and he's just being thrown headfirst into Challenger when he's, gold at a competitive level, So I think it'll be fun to see both rookies. I'm excited for rookies in both league. I think, definitely Licorice, even so, will be really fun to watch. And, of course, there are a ton of rookies in EU, so I'm not going to list them all. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that this kind of changed your perception a little bit and allowed you to adjust for what you think of some of the NA prospects going forward.